It is Donald Trump's own advisors who have caused the biggest, most devastating, and most incriminating leaks in the Epstein files. And it just happened again to a fired former White House advisor who has caused so many problems for Donald Trump in his many attempts to cover up his relationship with and the crimes that he committed alongside Jeffrey Epstein. We are going to get into it all, and why it means that there will be more attention paid to not just the cover-up happening in this administration, but in Donald Trump's first as well, because of a secret meeting with him and Ghislaine Maxwell. But before we get into it all, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button, because it goes a long way in supporting our work. Now, before we get into what was leaked by this former Trump advisor, this fired Trump advisor, we have to start with the context of the latest Epstein updates coming forth to us from Ari Melber right here.
By the deadline, but what we have now are new emails, investigator notes, new witness accounts, as well as material that goes well beyond some of what was in the DOJ's first release. Before we get into any of the context and the wider legal ramifications, let me tell you highlights of what are in these files. New flight records, newly revealed prosecutor notes, documentation of Donald Trump traveling with Epstein to a degree that even the people inside the DOJ at the time, people with knowledge of the case, found to be a, quote, surprise. More jet travel with Epstein than they knew at the time. A subpoena that was sent to Mar-a-Lago during the Maxwell probe. It was seeking records. That itself is not completely incriminating for Mar-a-Lago, but it's new, and you could see why they wanted to hide it. Here's the Washington Post headline on what is now another day of Epstein file dumps. Quote, second batch of Epstein files with many mentions of Trump. Here's a conservative paper, The Examiner, that says some of the new files include Trump's name, which is putting it mildly, or Mediaite, which is read widely in East Coast media circles, the 5 most shocking Trump mentions in the latest batch of Epstein docs. This is shaking up D.C.
Overnight, under pressure, the Department of Justice releasing thousands more Jeffrey Epstein files, the most substantial dump of documents so far.
Tips about President Trump's degree of involvement with Jeffrey Epstein.
Then this email mentioning President Trump from a federal prosecutor.
On a flight that Trump and Epstein were on?
A flight that Trump and Epstein were on.
Would be 2 possible witnesses in a Maxwell case?
In a Maxwell criminal case.
This group includes an awful lot of references to Trump in the paperwork.
Reporters, other people interested, obviously the members of Congress who demanded this by law have been going through this. At MS Now, we had people burning the midnight oil, even though it is, of course, a holiday week, as they went through these files, trying to verify, trying to make sense of it. Again, we're going to go through these new documents that include that subpoena I mentioned. It was in 2021, pretty recent, that it was sent to Mar-a-Lago and was part of the open case against Maxwell. Of course, the investigations of Maxwell have traversed multiple administrations. There's a photo of Trump with her. We don't know the context of that, but there it is. There are emails from a federal prosecutor about Trump flying on the Epstein jet, writing Trump traveled on Epstein's private jet many more times than previously has been reported. That's Jan 2020. And they note Trump was listed as a passenger on 8 flights in the 90s, including 4 flights where Maxwell was also present. They noted in a flight in 93, Trump and Epstein were the only 2 listed passengers. On another, there were 3 passengers. The other individual, besides the deceased trafficker Epstein and the current President Trump, was a 20-year-old name redacted. Now, you can see why a politician might not want any of that spilling out. On the other hand, those pieces of evidence, those references, do not in themselves implicate Donald Trump in a crime or wrongdoing. And that's important to note, given all the interest and some of the salacious details here. The files also have a letter that is purported to have been written by Epstein, so it's in these files, to a serial sex abuser, Larry Nassar.
This has been a failed cover-up attempt after a failed cover-up attempt after a failed cover-up attempt. And so much of it is because of the incompetent people that Donald Trump has surrounded himself with. It's almost comical at this point. Sure, he put stupid people around him because stupid people would bend to his will. But I guess he never realized he might actually need them to do their jobs. The job of Pam Bondi is not to make sure that she is being an independent and fair attorney general who is overseeing the laws. No. Pam Bondi works for Donald Trump, but he never thought that she would have an actual job to do. He always thought that it would just be Fox News hits and yelling about Joe Biden in the auto pen or whatever Pam Bondi was going to be complaining about. But she has failed him. And it's not the only person in Donald Trump's administration who has failed him, which is why this leak is going public. A new Epstein leak reveals this photo of Donald Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell that was found on Steve Bannon's cell phone. Of course, Steve Bannon, who worked in the first Trump White House, should be made public a photo in an email that reads, "I hope you're well. I'm helping out with the responsiveness review for the WBTW, and I've been looking through Steve Bannon's iPhone 7. As I was going through the images on that phone, I found an image of Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell on Bannon's phone. So Donald Trump's former advisor in the White House in his first term on his iPhone 7 had a photo of Donald Trump in Ghislaine Maxwell that has been redacted from the Epstein files. Now why? How could that happen? Besides the fact that there is a large-scale cover-up designed to strictly protect Donald Trump, why would that happen? Let's take the idea that Trump is being protected out of this, right? Of course, that's imbecile to suggest that this isn't a cover-up for Trump. But let's just separate that. The DOJ has told us that they are only redacting images, that they are only making sure that they are focused on the victims. That's it. Focused on the victims is what Pam Bondi wants you to believe, what Todd Blanche wants you to believe. So a photo of Ghislaine Maxwell and Donald Trump that Steve Bannon had was redacted from the Epstein files. For what reason? Well, victims. That's what Pam Bondi told us. So there's a photo with Donald Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell and one of Epstein's victims, Maxwell's victims, Trump's victims. We don't know. But why I think it is so important that we talk about Ghislaine Maxwell and Donald Trump's relationship more is because Ghislaine Maxwell, too many, it is viewed as someone who is kind of just Epstein's right-hand woman, that she was there. But that's kind of the extent of the thought about her. But one, she is a criminal herself, and she abused these children herself as well. She wasn't just, over in the corner pushing paper. But the pushing paper doesn't really sell enough of what Ghislaine Maxwell was doing. She was organizing in many ways this entire criminal cabal alongside Epstein. And that was certainly much more, in my opinion, at least having to do with the coordination of these crimes. And that's very, very frightening and certainly needs to be looked at more. Because I think that goes to the cover-up beginning in the first administration, that Donald Trump knew that this wasn't just a couple of photos of Epstein and him, that he was part of this criminal cabal, and in many ways, more than just participating, but in planning and executing on it. And that's something that needs more attention. And Jamie Raskin is raising these questions as he continues to call out the cover-up that's happening in this clip right here.
Is this a cover-up?
Well, sure. I mean, if you read the statute, the only things they're allowed to be redacting are related to child sex abuse, physical abuse, ongoing investigations, which they say there are none, and national security. So how can you block out an entire document? It makes no sense. And remember, Trump opposed the legislation up until the very end when he could read the writing on the wall. Then he said, I'm for it. They decided they're just going to try to obstruct the implementation of the legislation. So that's the fight that we're in now.
Do you think the 30-day time frame for release of these documents was realistic?
Well, yeah, given that they came to us back in July and said they'd been through all the documents and they couldn't find any basis for bringing any other lawsuits. They'd already scrutinized them.
What of this do you think falls into the category of protecting victims, and what falls into the category of cover-up? Because obviously there is a very strong interest in making sure the victims are protected.
Yeah, I'd say probably 0 and 100. They've not shown any deference or respect for the victims at all, for the survivors of this nightmare. And it's all about covering up things that, for whatever reason, Donald Trump doesn't want to go public, either about himself, other members of his family, friends, Jeffrey Epstein, or just the social business cultural network that he was involved in for at least a decade, if not longer.
So do you think this actions that the Department of Justice are taking on this are specifically designed to protect Donald Trump?
Well, what else? I mean, that's their whole business model. In fact, they're trying to reorganize American constitutional jurisprudence and the rule of law around the idea that the entire executive branch serves one guy. That's the unitary executive theory, that this is all about serving whatever Donald Trump wants. So yeah, I can't imagine what other interests they have in mind.
One of the things we did see were a number of pictures of former President Bill Clinton with Jeffrey Epstein, with Ghislaine Maxwell in a jacuzzi, swimming in a pool. How do you explain that connection, and are you comfortable with it?
I mean, I have no idea. This is why we want to get to the bottom of it and get all of the facts out to, to the public. I mean, that's what this is about. And, look, there are clearly lots of people that are in photographs with Jeffrey Epstein, and in addition to being a child sex predator and an international child sex abuse trafficker, he was very much of a socialite and a sycophant and a panderer to different people. So there's lots of people who've appeared in those contexts, and we shouldn't be covering up for anybody if they were actually involved in criminality. And otherwise, it's embarrassing to people, but the Congress has said we don't want the suppression of materials simply because somebody may be embarrassed. I mean, Bill Clinton has appeared along with Donald Trump, along with Noam Chomsky, and other people from different aspects of our society.
We need to ask all of the questions. Nothing should be off limits because this administration has given us nothing to trust and everything to question. So we are going to continue to call them out on this show. And if you want to support, that is always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you soon.